What's up guys, Hello for Football Talk here. The 2025 NFL offseason has arrived, and before we fully dive into draft season, I want to do my annual free agency video where I play matchmaker, finding one fit for all 32 teams with a player about to hit the open market. This is always a great way to transition to this stage of the calendar because it makes me go through every single roster, update or reconfirm in my brain with a slate of tools on the personnel end, but also some additions to the coaching staff, then go through the pending free agents by position and see what makes sense. The purpose isn't necessarily to get these exactly right, because that's nearly impossible without any insider knowledge, although I typically hit on like 3 or 4 names, but rather give the spotlight to each team for a minute or two and outline in one position they could be looking to address this way. Free agency is supposed to 8 teams with filling out the roster to a certain level of competence, so they can largely get the best players on the board at the time the draft rolls around there on the clock, but I will mention how that could be a factor in the decision making for some of these franchises. We'll go 1 through 32 here based on effective cap space as of February 18th, meaning the actual cash available after you sign your draft class and fulfill minimum requirements for your roster, with the graphic provided by overthecap.com, who currently projected $272.5 million base salary. The final number should be announced any day now, by the way. And at the very top of the list, with a substantial margin to the rest of the league, are the New England Patriots. And it's pretty clear what they need to do with all the money available to them. Give your highly promising second-year quarterback Drake May the tools to succeed. The top 2 priorities have to be both offensive tackle spots and finding a legit number 1 receiver. I've consistently mocked the form one of those to them with the 4th overall pick in the draft, and there are more than viable options in free agency for them to target, but let's have some fun here. Yes, they brought Mike Vrabel back to Foxborough as a culture guy and defensive-minded head coach, but he understands the value of a true alpha pass catcher, considering his reaction to when the Titans traded A.J. Brown. So I landed on T. Higgins, coming off a season on the franchise tag, and his current quarterback Joe Burrow consistently vying for the organization to change the way they handle future contract commitments, getting the massive deal around $30 million annually that he's been looking for. Of course, Cincinnati suddenly announced they plan on using the franchise tag on T if they can strike a long-term deal, literally as I finalized all of my notes. So alternative, I'd bring up a cheaper option, Amari Cooper here, but him just becoming available or tag and trade isn't off the table at all yet. So we'll just entertain this here a little bit. Last year the Patriots got outbid for Calvin Ridley by Tennessee actually, but now they get that big-bodied X-receiver they can isolate on the backside, breaking towards the middle, and Drake can throw the ball up to down the field. Kayshon Boutte showed flashes as a vertical flanker. Pop Douglas I like a lot in the slots. Whatever you get from last year's early 2nd round pick Jalen Polk after a horrendous rookie season is a plus. Javon Baker selected later, maybe he can get on the field sparingly, but now all of a sudden this resets the pecking order and puts everybody else in spots that make sense for them. Next up we've got the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, with Pete Carroll coming out of retirement and joining the Silver and Black, I had to go defense here, where firstly they have to make decisions on quality contributors at all 3 levels if they want to prioritize keeping them in-house. We still have no idea what their plans at quarterback are, now with Tom Brady kind of running that whole operation behind the scenes it appears, and I'm just not going to try to figure it out here. I had them taking Colorado's Shedeur Sanders, 6th overall in the mock draft I posted a few days ago. Taking away unrestricted and exclusive live free agents for now, here are the 3 cornerbacks currently on the contract by the Raiders: Jack Jones, Jacorian Bennett, and Cameron Richardson. The latter 2 of those were drafted just outside the top 100 in these past couple of years. The starting nickel Nate Hobbs is about to hit the open market, so they could use some help inside and out, while the defense overall forced just 13 turnovers last season. Byron Murphy, formerly of the Vikings, has been a true plus starter at both for different teams and different schemes, and he was just tied for 1st at this position with 6 interceptions. Under Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator in 2024, Vegas played more cover 0 than any other team in the league, but they were also top 7 in both cover 2 and 3. So getting a veteran in there with the football IQ and experience to excel in a variety of assignments and give that unit flexibility in who they still might put around him would be a great step in keeping this a sneaky good unit actually. Next we've got the Washington Commanders. To have Washington up here at number 3 coming off an NFC Championship game appearance, in contrast to what these 2 teams we just discussed currently feel like, is pretty wild. They massively exceeded expectations after drafting Jaden Daniels 2nd overall and completely overhauling their coaching staff, but as you look through the roster, there's still pretty glaring areas of need. Outside of Terry McLaurin, last year's 3rd round pick Luke McCaffrey is the only wide receiver currently on the contract, although I believe they could very much be a Deebo Samuel trade destination with the San Francisco connection of general manager Adam Peters. They lose a couple of tight ends, Bobby Wagner in the middle of the defense is a free agent. They could add at least one more corner and maybe slide Max Stainer still back inside in year 2. What I ultimately landed on, however, is who they have coming off the edge defensively. Unless you want to dial up Frankie Lewis usage at the line, Dorrance Armstrong is the only summer-proven commodity there. So why not poach from a main division rival, with Josh Sweat cashing in a Super Bowl MVP level performance. This guy can win the corner on tackles, but even more so we just saw him bully Joe Thuney with speed to power maneuvers. You bring him over with guys that can create push up the middle, and now you really compress the pocket on quarterbacks to force certain passes. Dan Quinn wants to throw waves at his opponents, so I'd expect him to be far from done with addressing the position, but this will be a key step in molding this group, as they have the quarterback in place to make the group really matter in high scoring affairs. The Arizona Cardinals are the next team up here, and though Arizona's inconsistency on offense last year was frustrating, especially for someone who made a video on them midway through this past season like me, but outside of one of the guard spots, they pretty much have all the pieces in place to challenge opponents with a multifaceted attack, which when the run game was working, looked kinda beautiful to me. The defense on the other hand has consistently needed to punch above their weight, with very few proven commodities outside of Buda Baker, and while lesser known, I'd also throw in Garrett Williams at nickel into the category. If the Eagles stick with the philosophy of not committing substantial financial resources to the linebacker position, a Swiss Army knife and groupies like Zach Bond coming off an all-pro season will make a ton of sense here. Instead though, I went for a reunion between Arizona and Hassan Reddick. I don't know exactly how he looks back at his time with the Cardinals as a former first-round pick, who he didn't find the right usage for until the 4th year of his rookie deal, but he posted 11 plus sacks in 4 straight years with 3 different teams prior to the Jets fiasco last year. Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis will outline a clear deployment as an outside rusher, not asking to play a ton on early downs since they have those big body edge setters. They also have the spending power to hand the 30-year-olds a good chunk of like a 2 or 3 year deal up front, but then make the rest of the deal heavily incentive based. Take care of him financially and just have him focus on the field away from the big markets that he's previously been in, returning his old stomping grounds. Now for the Minnesota Vikings, another team that certainly outperformed how people viewed them coming into the 2024 season, even though it ultimately ended with the first round playoff exit as a 13-team squad. Whether they bring back Zach Darnold on more of a short-term deal to see if he can bounce back from closing the season with his worst 2 games in back-to-back weeks after an otherwise outstanding comeback from irrelevance, or they hand the keys to JJ McCarthy coming off a torn meniscus that cost him his entire rookie season. If they just find a little more reliable running game to give them a semblance of balance, this offense under Kevin O'Connell has the infrastructure to maintain success. Defensively, maybe no other franchise has gotten more of a collection of 11 players with the level of individual quality than Minnesota, with Brian Flores calling the shots. Depending on if Harrison Smith returns at age 36, they may be looking to replace 4 or 5 starters in the secondary from a year ago, even though that unit has lost some steam towards the end of the last couple of years, when opponents had figured out trends for what they want to do schematically. I'd think they'll continue that line of team building rather than betting on stars. Someone who could fit in very well here is Carlton Davis, who already signed his big deal with the Bucs before getting traded to Detroit for a year. Coming off a fractured jaw that cost him about the final month of last season, the still only 28-year-old may be looking for some stability with a contending team in a system he's somewhat familiar with. The Vikes played more man coverage on the stretch, which Davis can be an asset for with his physicality at the line, but they've also run a bunch of fire zone blitzes, just like what Todd Bowles heavily restructured his defense around in Tampa, so I really like this fit here. And similarly, the Chargers looked like they were definitely ahead of schedule last year, only they did it with a complete revamp of the organization, both from a front office and coaching perspective. The biggest story to me was the turnaround of the defense under coordinator Jesse Minter, with largely the same pieces that the previous staff couldn't turn into a comprehensive unit. Still, the toughness Jim Harbaugh and company instilled in his franchise as a whole was palpable when they hit the field on Sundays, despite being strapped for cash due to all the dead money lingering from guys that weren't even in the building anymore. An area where we didn't see them operate how they probably intended to was how the offense was called, as they eventually put games in the hands of the quarterback Justin Herbert yet again, while the run game couldn't consistently keep them ahead of the chains. I'd love to see them bring back J.K. Dobbins, since he did give them some juice following an injury-laden previous few years. They have those 2 bookends at tackle, but guard play was a massive issue, whether it was being able to create movement at the point of attack, or keeping the interior pockets firm for the quarterback. Let's change that by stealing Trey Smith off the team that the entire AFC is trying to push off the throne after the vulnerability they showed in Super Bowl 59. pushing guys back on double teams, asking him to kick out edge defenders, cave in one side of the formation when you want to wrap around him. I believe the former Chief could add a significant boost to the ground game, and you may be able to get him closer to the 20 rather than the $25 million annual value that has been discussed with him. Next up, the Chicago Bears. We'll stick with the offensive line here, because it's not hard to point out where the root of the problems were this past season. The offensive play calling left me scratching my head on a weekly basis, whether it was protection plans, play sequencing, or simply coaching aspects like spacing between routes. However, their play up front, and in particular in the interior, affected everything they wanted to do. They averaged just 3.3 yards running between the guards, there were constant busts in protection, and as a result, first overall pick Caleb Williams resorted to some of the bad tendencies that he showed with poor line play in his final season at USC, trying to be Superman all the time. I think it all has to start with taking some pressure off him in what he was asked to do pre-snap already, with setting protections, as well as sort some of the movement across the front during the play, and finding a reliable center. After struggling to find his footing in the NFL for his first 2 years, Austin Corbett turned himself into a viable starter across the three interior spots, and really found the home at the pivot in Carolina, before ultimately having his best year cut short 5 games in. With only 9 play total over the last 2 years, you can probably get a solid discount on someone who'll turn 30 right as next season starts. But that's the approach Chicago should take here. Find 5 capable starters through the different avenues available to you, and give new head coach Ben Johnson the basis on which you built one of the elite offenses in the NFL in Detroit. Moving on now to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have committed a lot of the draft capital to the offensive line, and because of that can also focus on depth this offseason when it comes to that group. Obviously what they'll do at quarterback is the main storyline. They'll dictate the offseason, whether they keep Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields. Are they in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes as betting odds might suggest? Are they a quarterback team in the draft? This may all take a while for us to get an answer. Another receiving weapon alongside the volatility of George Pickens has to be a priority, and I could easily see them address it in late April yet again. But flipping to the other side of the ball, the corner position is very much in question outside of Joey Porter Jr., which even he regressed in his sophomore campaign. Both Dante Jackson and Cam Sutton are pending free agents, and even if they feel like they found a gem last year in UDFA Beanie Bishop, they lack answers at that second spot outside. Isaiah Oliver, formerly of the Jets, could make sense as more of a physical presence in the slot, but as far as that feels like corner goes, I think they might target another former high draft pick of another team. Pittsburgh typically goes for these guys they can get at a discount, and I think Eric Stokes, formerly of the Packers, could make a lot of sense. With as much cover one as they like to run, the former Georgia standout will fit in very well schematically, as someone with the speed to hang deep with guys, as he hopes he can reach the levels he once showed as a rookie, prior to injuries costing him in the next 2 years, and then eventually starting job last year. Bringing us to the Detroit Lions, if not for the Steelers clearing a good chunk of the cap by releasing Preston Smith last Friday, we would have had a smooth transition from Bears head coach Ben Johnson to his former team here, as the Lions make the move to newly hired John Morton, previously the passing game assistant in Denver. It'll be interesting which dials he will turn up or down, although structurally they'll probably remain quite similar. That means they'll be in 11 personnel primarily, with Amon-Ra St. Brown as the over-the-middle possession style receiver, and Jameson Williams developing into more of a run-off-the-catch weapon, alongside what he provides as a vertical threat. But otherwise Khalif Raymond is the only other guy of note under contract, and they primarily want to limit him to return duties. What they still need is that reliable number 3, who can do some dirty work from condensed splits, providing insert blocks, but also someone who can win one-on-one on the outside when defenses ask him to. Demarcus Robinson has been an underrated player for several seasons now, I believe. He's only missed one total game for his entire 9-year career, and averaged about 35 catches for 420 yards and 4 touchdowns over the last 6 seasons between 3 different teams, and he posted career highs in the latter 2 categories in 2024, when he also logged 82% of the snaps for the Rams. He'll turn 31 early this upcoming season, so he'll probably land somewhere between the $5 million he earned most recently and the $2+ million he's gotten in most other years after his rookie deal ran out. Securing him for a couple of seasons with some nice incentives for a contender in the NFC would make a ton of sense for both sides. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals. It's going to be a very intriguing offseason with the Bengals to see if they stick with the principles or are willing to adapt the way they handle contracts now that the star quarterback has made his feelings clear pretty much since they've been eliminated, while legitimately laying out how they can restructure existing contracts to make room for keeping the band together on offense and improve the other side of the ball. Regardless of the big decision around T. Higgins, bringing improving commodities on defense has to be prioritized, with how we've seen them fail to bring along young draft picks to replace veterans that they've allowed to walk out of the door recently. Previous defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo became the sacrificial lamb after finishing bottom 6 in pretty much every meaningful metric because he simply didn't have the personnel at his disposal anymore. His replacement Al Golden comes over from Notre Dame, but they believed in locking up the corners in man coverage and creating chaos with the guys near the ball to force turnovers. Cornerback Javarius Ward comes off a year where he battled incredible personal adversity with the death of his young daughter, but has recently proclaimed that he'll be ready to go for whoever decides to sign him, since he can't deal with living in the Bay Area anymore. He'll turn 30 this offseason, but should be completely fresh physically, and in 2023 performed at an all-pro level. Bringing him in as a boundary corner, like the 49ers progressively used him, he'd be isolated on the backside of the formation, so they can roll coverage away from him, could be a key piece in turning around this unit fairly quickly. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, I was really going back and forth here because there aren't really any glaring holes on this Packers roster, but they're also kind of lacking real difference makers who they know can step up for them in key moments. Running back Josh Jacobs has previously let it be known that they need to add a true alpha receiver to the young core of pass catchers, but in terms of guys with contracts about to run out, there's very little that they need to address immediately. One area they do need to be more impactful with how they operate defensively is getting home with 4 rushers. Kenny Clark is still someone who can stay on the field for young true passing downs. Devontae Wyatt has shown flashes of being an interior disruptor, and while he's yet to enter that next tier, Rashan Gary at least condenses the edge consistently for you. I wouldn't mind the latter being paired with more of a speed rusher who can finish sacks, but those simply generally aren't the guys that they want to target. Instead I landed on a guy who's already been in the league for just over a decade by now, and that is Khalil Mack. He's that prototype heavy-handed guy on the edge who did play with his paw in the dirt prior to his stint with the Chargers, and Green Bay is very familiar with his impact that he can provide from his stage in Chicago. Coming off just a 6-sack campaign, you may be able to get a slight discount on a proven commodity, who a year prior still logged 17 sacks and 21 tackles for loss. Jeff Haflett, defensive coordinator, immediately bumped that defense up, and now they can really crush the pocket, with Lucas Van Ness not having shown the development that he'd really like to see now coming into year 3, I believe. Progressing to the San Francisco 49ers, I went with another reunion here for a team that has somewhat lost their defensive identity in recent years. I certainly don't love Colton McKivitz at right tackle, a position they could very well target with the 11th overall pick in the draft, and they'll need to replenish some depth across the offensive unit. However, they finished last year 29th in points allowed per game, when they were 3rd, 1st, and 9th most previously in the category, is unacceptable. I already mentioned Javarius Ward as a fit with a different team after his comments about not being able to stay in the Bay Area after dealing with the loss of his child. Dre Greenlaw is a complicated potential re-signing, kind of the tragic torn Achilles when just running onto the field in the Super Bowl just over a year ago, and with them restructuring Von Hargreaves' contract at 32 years old, he's a likely post-June 1 release candidate. So I present a slightly cheaper alternative here, coming back to San Francisco after 3 years in Denver, and that's nose tackle DJ Jones. Having already hit the big 3-0 himself and had a big payday with the Broncos, you'll probably be able to bring him back for another couple of seasons around the $10 million price tag, and he'd immediately firm up the interior of the run defense, which just finished 29th in success rate allowed. They already brought back Robert Saleh at DC, and the Witch Jones became a stand-up player, and now you take some of the load off Fred Warner by keeping him clean, and then by putting opponents in more obvious passing situations, it also allows Nick Bosa to get home more regularly as well. Bringing us to the Tennessee Titans, if a team picks number 1 in the draft, you'd like to think they're at least near the top of the list in available cap space as well. With how happy Tennessee was to hand out significant money to Calvin Ridley, the Jerry Sneed after trading for him, and quite a few other names on defense, they sit at 13th overall, with Mike Boganci now replacing Ryan Carfron as general manager, as part of their semi-annual switch of GM or head coach. So we aren't totally sure which spending strategy they'll choose here, but I think with Brian Callen's seat getting pretty warm here already, they'll be willing to spend yet again to keep everybody employed. I wouldn't be shocked if they chose to add a veteran quarterback to just compete with Will Levis, but more likely the guys in charge won't tie the future to that guy's erratic play, and instead they either sign a Sam Darnold, or maybe buy themselves a little more time with a promising rookie season by Cam Ward out of Miami. Either way, for this offense to show signs, they simply need to address the right side of the O-line and find more reliable pass catchers, as Tyler Boyd and even touchdown phenom Nick Westbrook-Ikhine are pending free agents. That term reliable is best described by Chris Godwin, at least when he's been able to stay healthy. Coming off the dislocated ankle with the Bucs, with an already notable injury history, I don't believe he commands top dollar, but Tennessee has the freedom to lock him up for the next 3 years or so, in the higher teens in terms of AAV. Whoever Callen entrusts this more timing-based aerial attack at quarterback having a tough as nails middle of the field target and someone who take off pressure as a screen option would be a great addition. And before Godwin got hurt last year, he was off to the best start of his career. Bringing us to the Los Angeles Rams, and if they decide to make one more run at the championship with this young defense and Matt Stafford at the helm, with the news of them looking for a Cooper Kupp trade partner, replacing that guy with Godwin would make a lot of sense as well. But with the weirdness around how they want to handle the quarterback question, I didn't want to go there. Instead, I'm going to address the defensive back 7, which does certainly leave things to be desired, even for as impressive as the front is shown to be. They have a bunch of young corners who they need to grow alongside the veteran Darius Williams, but the second level is where the cupboard is really bare. Omar Straits currently is the only linebacker under contract who performed decently as a UDFA part-time starter, but they desperately need some stability there. Robert Spillane has quietly been a legit high-end starter these past 2 years for the Raiders. He's racked up a ton of tackles, yet missed less than 8% of his attempts. He has a knack for sorting through traffic to get to the ball. He's been pretty effective on limited pass rush opportunities, and then I really like his ability to command space in zone coverage. With as much cover 3 and 6 as the Rams ran last year, and the defensive coordinator Chris Schuler, you need someone who can match up with running backs when he catches them releasing out of the backfield, and that's consistently been an area opponents have been able to attack against them. Through 7 years as a pro, Spillane has only earned just over $12 million, so probably offering him more than half of that number on an annual basis on a 2 or 3 year deal. I think he can significantly upgrade that group, and this guy's an energizer bunny you haven't had for a while, cleaning up behind a disruptive young D-line. Moving on to a team with all the stability in terms of the guys running the show, the New York Giants, who have actually been discussed as a potential trade destination for Matt Stafford if LA decides to enter a different phase without him. Big Blue meanwhile has entered one of the darkest times of the franchise, only winning 3 games, yet not controlling their own destiny with 2 quarterback needy teams ahead of them in the draft, and watching a beloved play in Saquon Barkley spearhead that Eagles championship run has to be devastating. Whether they bring in a veteran or the guys available at 3 overall in late April, improvement at the most important position is almost guaranteed. I thought the O-line when healthy looked as comprehensive a unit as it has in several years, and they have some standout rookie skill guys between Malik Neighbors and Tyron Tracy. Where I was really disappointed was the defense outside of Dexter Lawrence. They absolutely need one more viable outside corner, but looking at the starting 11 from a year ago, Jason Pinnock at safety creates the only spot now voided. So what I'll do here is continue to pick away the Raiders defense that performed beyond the talent level and what general NFL watchers will probably give them credit for. Safety Javon Merrick is someone who didn't deliver a bunch of splash plays during his rookie deal in Vegas, but given them a pretty damn good down-to-down consistency. Adding him alongside second-year Mental Lubin will give defensive coordinator Shane Bowen a lot of flexibility in terms of the coverage menu that he can access because of the range from Merrick as opposed safety, and he's a steady layer of your run defense with the angles from depth, who has improved his missed tackle rate all 4 years as a pro. Next, the Denver Broncos. Although a discussion can be had about how the uber-aggressive defense can function against top-flight quarterbacks, Vance Joseph's unit was a menace last season for the rest of the league. So Denver's focus now will probably be on adding a couple more pieces to the skill position group around Bo Nix, coming off a rookie season that exceeded pretty much everybody's expectations, and I had him as QB3 in the draft. Because I'm so pilled to thinking ahead to late April, I'll let myself be influenced by the idea of potentially taking one of the top 2 tight ends, or maybe somehow Heisman Trophy runner-up Ashton Jeanty falls to them, with how unpredictable the running back rotation has been under Sean Payton. So I did ultimately go back to the defense, where Alex Singleton is the only linebacker with any significant live reps on the roster currently. I had fairly high expectations for what Drew Sanders could turn into as a versatile piece added to the pressure packages as a 3rd round pick from 2 years ago, but he only played 18 snaps in 4 games this past season. Losing a 91% player like Cody Barton, you need to find someone who can stay on the field for you in his spots, and they could actually upgrade with a name like Ernest Jones. For whatever reason, the Rams, despite their own problems at their position, were willing to trade him to Tennessee for just a 6th round pick last offseason. Then they decided to swap him for Jerome Baker in the 4th due to underwhelming team results at the deadline, and he gave Seattle a solid play anyway. At still only 25 years old, you can lock him up on a 3 to 4 year deal in the lower teens of AAV, and he's a phenomenal addition for a unit that blitzed at the 3rd highest rate in the entire league, tapping into the pressure component that he provided early on in LA to overwhelm backs in protection. On the other end of the spectrum of defensive football, we have a Jacksonville Jaguars team that quite a few football nerds like me have pretty high expectations for, with DC Ryan Nielsen taking control of a talented collection of players, but ultimately finished ahead of only Carolina in both DVOA and DP per play, as the two gold standards of advanced metrics. Outside of right guards, they bring back the entire starting lineup from a year ago in offense, and now with Liam Cohen coming over from Tampa Bay, I think we could see that unit turn things around pretty quickly. The same can actually be said about the defense personnel-wise, where Andre Cisco is the lone name to require a new deal, but that's a pretty massive potential departure, and we don't have the same proof of concept with Anthony Campanile calling plays for the first time in his career since his time with Don Bosco High School 15 years ago, after doing a great job with the linebacker room in Green Bay this past season. Especially in the secondary, he needs proven commodities to jumpstart that operation, and DJ Reed coming over from the Jets I believe could be a great fit. Having experience with both the Brian Flores and Josh Boyer style system, but also more of a traditional rush for and play a wider coverage catalog, and a Jeff Hafley, we have yet to see what Campanile wants to do philosophically. Leaning into the strengths of the personnel makes sense for any first-time NFL coordinator, and with the financial commitment to Tyson Campbell as your isolated boundary corner, having that off-coverage read and react field set option like Reed makes a ton of sense, similar to what Darius Williams actually was for his previous coaching staff a couple of years ago still. Staying in the AFC South with the Indianapolis Colts, way too much defense talk already for me to dive into what former DC Gus Bradley was for a mind-numbing stretch of time, including 3 years in Indy, as someone who still persists on the 3-deep structure from the Legion of Boom days in Seattle, with hyper-predictable tendencies and no willingness to adapt to the modern game. I think they really need to add to the safety room, who Lou Anarumo, not taking over the reins, runs his unit through typically, but let's talk about a much more fun match that I came up with here. Assuming this is a prime destination for tight end, with the 14th overall draft pick, both the Colts week 1 starters at center and Ryan Kelly, and Riker Will Fries are set to hit the open market. With what the athletic skill set for rookie Tanner Bortolini could add to that group, I believe they'll choose to pass, paying up for the former, but because they already lose some size, how about putting one of the largest men on earth next to him? Mekhi Becton came from the depths of hell as a bust-out attacker with the Jets to not only become a useful player, but a true plus start at right guard for the Super Bowl champs last year. In no way am I ruling out the Eagles re-signing him, but just picture Bortolini in a sandwich between Becton and Quentin freaking Nelson, two more than solid stars on the edges. That offensive line is ready to kick some ass. We saw Jonathan Taylor really heat up down the stretch. Shane Steichen in the front office are committed to riding out the Anthony Richardson experience, it seems. And now just imagine all the possibilities for this run game. The thought experiment was just too good for me to pass up, and so I just went with it. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers now though, as already referenced when discussing the Jaguars, the only defense below them in all the major statistical categories was Carolina. Now, the reason for the depths that they reached is explained much more easily. They already focused the vast majority of resources on building around Bryce Young last offseason, they lacked any proven pass rushers, and then they also lost 2 of the top 3 players to injury in the first month between Derek Brown and Shaq Thompson. Deciding on who might replace Austin Corbett at center, if they allow him to walk, and dropping in one more pass catcher who can deliver beyond the structure of the attack will be priorities, but to give Bryce Young a chance, they can't ask him to put up 30 points if they actually want to win. I expect him to tap into all avenues when it comes to addressing the edge position, but the cover to safety is completely barren. Damani Richardson as a UDFA from last year is literally the only guy returning as of right now. I think they need to swing for the fences and add a true difference maker like Javon Holland. Casual NFL fans may not jump out of their seats when they hear a name like this, but I think you can make a solid case that this is the best overall player hitting the open market. His ability to drive on routes from depth, range out to the numbers as a post safety, cover one-on-one in the slots, but also drop down into the box late and create stops in the run game, to me is just such a complete player, and chess piece on the back end. With just 1 pick over the last 2 years combined, you can probably lock him up on like a 4-year deal, somewhere between 70 and 80 million, and he's only 25 in a couple of weeks. Bringing us to those recently mentioned Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, watching them during this championship run, it became apparent how much they stood above the rest of the league in terms of talent that they had amassed under Howie Roseman across the board. So there aren't any true holes they need to address, because not only do they have a bunch of star players on offense especially, but the depth that they have built up is equally impressive. They do have to make decisions on Mekhi Becton at one of those guard spots, and Zach Baun coming off an all-pro season as already discussed, when Philly has typically refused to commit financially substantial resources to the linebacker position, but the most losses numbers-wise could be on this defensive line. Josh Sweat probably earned himself a big payday with his performance on the biggest stage, and someone will try to make Wilton Williams an anchor of the interior rather than a big-time rotational piece. I went with a name that a division rival once spent the 2nd overall pick on, and won Defensive Rookie of the Year, but never lived up to his massive ceiling, in large part due to injuries, and that is Chase Young. I was rather disappointed in 2023 once he was traded to San Francisco, but failed to bring it on a consistent basis for an NFC powerhouse. But I don't think people give him enough credit for how he performed for the Saints last year. This dude was tied for 9th among all NFL defenders with 66 total QB pressures on a team that largely found itself trailing. It doesn't seem like he'll ever be a type of physical edge setter you'd like to see in the run game, but he can very much convert speed to power to cave in one side of the pocket, similar to Josh Sweat, and playing alongside a group of sturdy linemen will force him to up his level of effort while probably not being asked to play a massive rate of snaps. Moving on to the New York Jets, a lot of questions surround this Jets organization that exceeded its own standards for internal turmoil on a weekly basis as felt like last year. They hope to quickly close that chapter with the decision to move on from Aaron Rodgers, which should also free up some money, and bringing back a beloved former player in Aaron Glenn with his no bullshit attitude after a few years in Detroit, where that defense showed steady growth under him. They'll add someone at quarterback, but I wouldn't be shocked if they just went for a bridge here with Tyrod Taylor as they figure out some other pieces. I had to address the defense here, which severely underperformed in 2024 compared to what they had shown in previous couple of years, and what the level of talent would suggest they're capable of. The list of departures imminent for them is too long to go through in this context, but let's just say that they'll need to add some beef up front after getting moved off the ball too much in the run game, and that Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed are the only two names that played any meaningful snaps for them in the secondary for the past couple of years that will be back. To me, a glue piece of a championship defense that could help Glenn turn things around quickly, going back to the safety position, is former Texan and Chief Justin Reed. While he's not as dynamic as Holland as a rangy guy on the back end, his angles from depth to limit explosive runs, the ability to match up with bigger bodies, the communication skills to suck out air in the coverage, he's a very attractive target for a defense trying to rediscover their identity. He only just turned 28 years old, and is probably valued somewhere in the low to mid-teens on the annual basis. I think a lot of teams could actually use his services. We've reached the final team in the green, or grey in the case of this graphic, but with a cap. When it comes to effective cap space available, looking at the Baltimore Ravens, which isn't a bad spot for them to be, considering how close this roster feels to finally getting over the hump, with Lamar Jackson coming off his best season as a passer, Derrick Henry averaging nearly 6 yards per carry, and a defense that really found its stride over the second half of the season, when they made a couple of key tweaks in the secondary, and grew together as a unit with Zach Orr taking over as DC. When I think about what that unit felt like over the course of the season, however, where they simply weren't quite the same as 2023, was the second level. Roquan Smith's presence in coverage wasn't as palpable, and he was mostly put in situations to pick up routes that would specifically target him, although he still cleaned up a lot in the run game. But it's that partner in crime that they lost with Patrick Queen joining the Steelers as the division rivals that really became an issue. They were hoping Trenton Simpson could step up as a guy with similar dynamic traits, but ultimately benched him for Malik Harrison, who clearly presents some deficiencies in space. Now with Simpson being the only guy on the books alongside Roquan, I believe Kaiser White could be a great target for them. Whether at the end of his rookie deal with the Chargers, his one season in Philly, or his one healthy in Arizona, he's proven to be a very useful piece emerging in the front and back end. I think his confident space, the range to run down plays from the backside, and what they can tap into with him as a versatile piece of the pressure packages would be a welcome addition in the $10 to $50 million range total over the next 2 years. Next, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not sure if people realize the Bucs have won the NFC South each of the past 4 years, following the Super Bowl title at the end of the 2020-21 season. Even I thought they might take a step back this past year after making the switch at offensive coordinator and some questions around the defense. With several young contributors stepping up, including an excellent rookie class, neither one of those things became a glaring issue. In fact, Liam Cohen's influence on offense, and in particular the run game, actually proved to lift into new heights. Graham Button at center was a major reason for more stability up front, but now it's slated to have a voided left guard in place of Brent Bredesen. I think they could take a similar path here to what they did when they signed him a few years ago, by bringing in another ascending young player who has not yet reached the ceiling and could therefore present a value addition. I was a big Aaron Banks fan when the Niners selected him in the second round 4 years ago, and he turned himself into a solid starter towards the end of his rookie contract. Tampa Bay may be able to get him on their banks on a $7 or $8 million basis for the next 3 to 4 years for what should be his athletic prime. I know he comes from more of a zone blocking background in San Fran, but at Notre Dame he actually was asked to execute a lot more down blocks, vertical combos, get on the move as a puller, We have yet to see if there'll be any conceptual changes under new OC Josh Grizzard, and maybe he merges those two worlds to some degree with his background in Miami under Mike McDaniel previously before being elevated now by the Bucs. But either way, I think Banks could give you that present quality of play at probably a lower number. Now, with the Houston Texans, we're looking at a team where the offensive line moved in the complete wrong direction, so reinforcements are desperately needed in Houston. Across the front five, you saw guys lose the matchups every other snap, missed assignments trying to pick up different games, allowing mucked up backers to run through cleanly, all culminating in the divisional round loss to the Chiefs, where Spags schemed up 8 unblocked pressures. Not even someone who's performed at the borderline All-Pro level before and Laramie tons of left tackle held his own. Shoring up their protection plans will be a major area of focus for new offensive coordinator Nick Caley, who helped the Rams overcome multiple injuries along their front, as they bring back all 5 starters from a year ago. And we've seen both the guards played in above average levels before, while they have 2 homegrown options at center. Right tackle to me is the biggest area of improvement as of right now, and who better provide some stability there than Morgan Moses. He had been a model of consistency across his first 10 years in the league, logging at least 14 starts in each of them by his rookie season, and offering a high floor as a pass protector especially. Even if they add another piece in the draft, with hopes of upgrading one of those 3 interior spots, having a guy out there who win the majority of battles, to where you don't have to full-line slide and ask your tight ends to block edge rushers in big moments, would be a great start in giving CJ Stroud a pocket that he can trust. Moving on to the team that eliminated the Texans in the divisional round, the Kansas City Chiefs. Getting dominated for the better part of 4 quarters, before putting lipstick on a pig that was Super Bowl 59, would humble anyone, but for a team trying to write history with the NFL's first ever three-peat, it offers a cold reality when you see some areas of your team that you simply have to make bigger commitments to if you want to get back to the mountaintop. Bringing back defensive stalwarts in Nick Bolton and Justin Reed will bring some tough decisions, but I think there are 2 positions that you absolutely have to address offensively, and that is wide receiver and left tackle. There are a variety of options for the latter one of those available, whether you see how much it would take for Baltimore's Ronnie Stanley to jump ship from one of the biggest challenges in the AFC, or you can shop in the cheaper aisle with a former top 10 pick whose career was derailed by injuries, but is still very young, like a Jedrick Wills from Cleveland. For them to open up this aerial attack, however, I believe it requires someone who can separate on the deep and intermediate level, since both Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice return from injury, with a suspension looming potentially, have proven to be more run-after-catch options. Again, they could dig a little deeper into the pockets with an Amari Cooper, but I've imagined them pairing up with Darius Slayton for a while now. For multiple years, the Giants have made him available via trades, but Casey never put in an offer, I believe. He drops the ball a little more than you'd like to see, but he offers the speed to soften the coverage underneath, and when he does have to deal with contact near the catch point, he has the ability to still come down with the ball, unlike some of the names that have moonlighted in that role previously. I believe he could be a cheaper, but also more impactful version of Hollywood Brown. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. For as much as we'd all like Jerry Jones and family to look themselves in the mirror and question if they truly believe they operate in the best interest of putting the highest quality product on the field, rather than just being the most present in the media, we can't deny that they've been very effective at acquiring young talent via the draft. The issue has been more so how they've chosen to keep those guys around, or in some cases when they didn't, as they now face tough calls on several long-term veterans, both developed in-house like Zach Martin and DeMarcus Lawrence, and acquired on shorter deals like Brandon Cooks and Eric Kendricks. I do believe they need to find a legit perimeter receiving option, and they don't have anyone they can rely upon at nickel still in the books, but if I had to name one unit that'll significantly look different than in previous iterations, it's the defensive line. They do have a couple of unproven young talents in Marcy Smith and Marshall Nealand, to go with Sam Williams, who had real flashes as a rotational player prior to missing all of last year with a torn ACL, and of course one of the elite defenders in Micah Parsons, but he's about to be the only one we've seen in any starting capacity. Longtime journeyman Calais Campbell, assuming he returns for one more year, would immediately give that unit a much different feel. Even in his age 38 season, this guy was one of the most effective down-to-down players in the entire league, finishing with both an elite run defense grade from PFF and routinely compressing the pocket. He can be the jumbo size at the end on early downs for them, while Marker can chase the ball from the backside, and then he slides inside to muddy up the pocket and passing lanes on the fine dropbacks. Which actually has us moving on to Campbell's most recent stop, the Miami Dolphins. Unless they feel comfortable moving either Austin Jackson or Patrick Paul into guard as late first and second round picks respectively, both of those spots are totally up in the air for them right now, for as perimeter oriented as the run game is, and how quickly Tua wants to get rid of the ball. There are so many moving pieces with that group, however, that I didn't want to focus on them, and instead looked at a defense that performed pretty darn well in relation to what people might have expected in year one under DC Anthony Weaver. if they have the cash available to bring back Javon Holland, as a chess piece on the back end will be a massive factor in how I look at that group that otherwise has nothing left at safety. But considering how much they've committed to the offense, finding cheap contributors who can give them quality snaps up front will be necessary to facilitate re-signing someone like Holland. A name like Greg Gaines, formerly of the Bucs and before that the Rams, could make a lot of sense here, as someone who can line up at a 4 out of 5 technique on base downs for an odd front team. We've seen him regress as more of a rotation play in Tampa with some of the youngsters they recently added, compared to what he was alongside Aaron Donald in LA. Yet I can very much picture him and Zach Sealer as those dirty work guys between the tackles, getting to third and long, where now you may be a sub of Gaines and use Jalen Phillips as a stand-up rusher with Bradley Chubb and Chubb Robinson on the edges. Right now the Finns simply don't have anyone on the roster who can eat up blocks and keep that second level clean on interior alongside Sealer, and I think Gaines could be a fairly cheap option there. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons. Going through the pending departures for Atlanta, I believe Drew Dalman at center is a glaring re-sign must in order to help get second-year quarterback Michael Penix Jr. off on the right foot. He has quietly been one of the most underrated guys at his position over the last 1.5 years prior to getting hurt, and would be a massive loss for how they want to run the ball for horizontal stretches, and even what he does for them as a pull-on-play action. Defensively, it almost feels like they're cursed, trying to find any consistency in rushing the pass off the edge, so I didn't feel comfortable matching him with one name here. Instead, what I believe new defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, formerly of the Jets, needs is a running mate for standout safety Jesse Bates. Veteran Justin Simmons gave them solid bang for the buck, but they could use some more youth. Julian Blackmon to me is an underappreciated guy on the back end, who's been held back by his usage under Gus Bradley in Indy, where in the traditional and outdated system, he was asked to play both the free and strong safety role in a cover-free base, depending who he had alongside him in different years. He's shown he can be an asset closer to the box and creating stops in the run game, as well as be a rangy post safety with excellent ball skills. To me, the key now is allowing him to tap into the versatility more in-game, where they rotate him and Bates at the snap, not make it as predictable where they'll end up, and allow those guys Raiders to take them to the football. Next, the Seattle Seahawks. We've discussed some pretty weak offensive lines today, and why they've struggled specifically as of recent. Anybody watching the Seahawks last year can see the interior part of the pocket getting driven back into Geno Smith's lap, and destroy what could have been on paper one of the most explosive aerial assaults in the league. Head coach Mike McDonald will have to consider how much the addition of Ernest Jones in the middle of this defense was worth in relation to how they need to invest into providing stability for the quarterback, whether that's Geno or someone else long term. Listening to some of the comments early on when they were limited from playoff contention, with hopes of Abe Lucas at right tackle, finally staying healthy, and performing up to what he showed as a rookie. You're looking at Anthony Bradford, Sataola Omea, and Christian Haynes battling for those two spots next to what is still a rather unproven center as well, and Olu Oluwatimi. Haynes was the only guy among that group I considered to become a legit starter eventually. So with him exclusively playing at right guard in both college and as a rookie, I tried to find someone for the left side, and James Daniels was a name that came to mind. The former Bayern Steeler has been a plus starter for each of his 7 years as a pro, I'd argue, and he was off to his best start in 2024, earning a 92.9 PFF grade through 3+ games before tearing his Achilles. We'll have to see how he overcomes this major injury, but this is someone who surrendered just 6 sacks across more than 3,300 career pass blocking snaps, and he has starting experience with Iowa and 1 year in the NFL at center if Olu struggles. Bringing us to the bottom 3, with how close the Buffalo Bills came to finally overcoming the boogeyman in the AFC with the Chiefs in the conference title game, I'd personally love to see them push all the chips in the middle of the table and make a cataclysmic trade for Myles Garrett, or maybe call around if a disgruntled wide receiver is available. However, outside of bringing in Von Miller a few years ago to put them over the top prior to this injury, that's generally not how they've operated. So instead, signing a smart, tough-nosed safety in the mold of the head coach Sean McDermott seemed a lot more on brand, and Cam Bynum of the Vikings is a name that popped to mind. You told Cole Bishop as a second rounder last year can be an impactful starter with his snap rate driven up alongside Taylor Rapp, but even then, I thought the free safety sets gave them some variety that they hadn't tapped into in the past. Moreover, while pending free agent Damar Hamlin was a big reason for this, the safeties struggling with angles from depth and allowing themselves to be put in bad positions when having to match routes were the costless issues that unit showed. Bynum was made a living of not allowing those situations to occur as someone with superb field vision and tackling in space. This is someone I was dubious about as a draft prospect 4 years ago, but he's locked over 3,300 snaps on defense in the latter 3 of those for Brian Flores in Minnesota because his presence on the field was required at all times. While they continued to morph the identity to some degree, and yet he continued to be an impactful starter. Now with the Cleveland Browns, for as bad a year as it was for them and the ramifications of Deshaun Watson's fully guaranteed contract still looming large over them, even as he's now torn his Achilles a second time during the offseason, the first string, if you will, on offense and defense is basically fully intact from what it looked like 2 years ago, when this team won 11 games, outside of the guys they purposefully moved on from, like a Joe Flacco, who would be available again, as Nick Chubb suffered his second career major knee injury. Yet there's one hole the size of Ohio itself at left tackle, where they didn't pick up Jedrick Wills' 50 option, and unless they want to do experiments with either Jack Conklin or DeJuan Jones as lifelong players on the right side, they have no one else they can call upon. So with how much Wills' status was up in the air throughout his tenure in Cleveland, I believe just need availability and a certain level of decency. Alaric Jackson has turned himself into the type of viable starter with the Rams for the last 2 years, after needing to find his footing for a couple previously. By no means is this an exciting signing, or even who I believe will be the primetime protector for whoever they move on to from Deshaun, potentially even with that second overall pick, but you don't ruin the rest of that unit with constant reshuffling. Jackson has posted pass blocking efficiencies of better than 96% each of the past 3 seasons, and only been held out of a couple of games by suspension over that stretch. Finally, we get to the team that always seems to make up the bottom of the list, the New Orleans Saints. Although with the cap wizardry of Mickey Loomis, their GM, the final number in red is never as bad as it initially appears, although the amount of dead cap listed for money rolled over from previous years is actually hilarious to consider with names that haven't even been on the roster in multiple years. While I've questioned where this extreme wave operating is supposed to ultimately lead them to, with Derek Carr, 30-year-old Kevin Kamara and an aging defense, it's kind of a fun thought exercise to go through every offseason. Considering they bring back pretty much the full band on defense, I look at what helped his attack look as capable during the Foreman and 2-0 start, and where things fell apart. And I learned pretty quickly on the offensive line. After that unit looked like a real strength early on, with Rokitelli Sifwanga making an effortless switch to left tackle, and Trevor Penning finally finding consistency on the right side, there was a lot of promise with them playing from ahead, running the ball at will, and then calling off play action shots and a Clint Kubiak. I'd expect Kellen Moore coming out from Philadelphia to stick with the formula, but having stability up front will be the name of the game. Patrick McCarry to me is someone who can provide that, and they're very familiar in the franchise's history with bringing over guys up front from Baltimore. He can immediately start at left guard, but because of the incredible positional flexibility that he showcased for the Ravens, to jump in at pretty much anywhere but the pivot, now you don't have to shuffle multiple guys around if you deal with an injury, and it just kinda acts as insurance for you. But that's gonna do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this preview of free agency and some thoughts on what your favorite team might do, please hit the thumbs up button for me and subscribe for future videos if you haven't done so yet. I'm curious to hear what you want your team to target or just general fits that make sense to you. Put them down below in the comments. As for my content schedule over the next few weeks and months, I'll take next week to focus on my film studies in preparation for the Combine and the draft in late April, although I'm sure I'll post some random clips I stumble upon on X, Blue Sky, and or Instagram. Then I'll have a video for you guys on the biggest rises and falls coming out of Indy, before I'll once again present my top 10 prospects at each position for the 2025 class, although I won't have individual write-ups coming out twice a week, like I've done before, because the volume simply exceeded what people could actually take the time to read for in years past. So instead I'll have one article on offense and defense each, still going top 10 at each position, but no more than like 200 words to summarize each player. And that gives me freedom to do a couple of other things, like my annual My Guys episode for prospects I like better than consensus rankings, and maybe a couple of other projects. I'm open to listening to some of your suggestions either here or on social media. Make sure to follow me on the different channels, for which the links are down below in the description, along with the link to my page helloswithfootballtalk.com, where you can find all of my content. So until then, see you later. Peace!